Welcome to Getcha Rocks Off with Mick Wall, the world's leading rock and metal writer. Each fortnight, Mick will unpack rock and roll stories that you probably won't find in print. So pour yourself a Jack and Coke and get ready to get your rocks off.
That's a good idea.
See, John already talking, even as we begin recording. That's how verite Getcha Rocks Off has become, featuring myself, Mick Wall, legendary figure in the world of rock and metal writing, and riding shotgun. His disciple, metal mate, and all-round bad egg. Yeah. John Harton.
Badass. With my pop shield.
Yeah, actually, yes.
Let's talk about that, didn't you? Because I turned up today with...
Yeah, a condom that you've placed over your microphone. It's a sort of a mask come condom.
Yeah, to fit with the modern age.
Right.
We're all masked these days, Mick. You may not have heard out here in the countryside.
But you have actually brought this thing and attached it to your protuberance.
I listened back, because being a professional, I listened back to our second podcast, which was about David Coverdale. And as you know, there was a slight hint of human error about the recording.
Yeah, there was something I feel that you did wrong, which affected my microphone.
I talked incredibly loudly throughout it. And
yes.
As a result of that, I think people virtually felt I was almost spitting in their ear.
Yeah.
So I've now got a pop shield prophylactic, which when I pronounce words like pop shield, will stop it from seeming as I'm spitting in their ear.
But what about when I start to...
Well, exactly. That's what's going to happen. Get yourself a pop shield. That's
Get yourself a pop shield. Yeah. Well, soon we will have Getcha Rocks Off branded
pop shields.
Pop shields.
Yeah.
All your get yourself
so
one.
When you start your own podcast, you can get one.
Get yourself one.
As if just anyone could throw together a podcast.
Exactly. You see, this is the level we operate on.
Yeah.
That is not easily attainable for the mere amateur.
No. The fact that you just walked in here and said, what are we doing it about today again?
Okay. Well, on that subject, John and I, we have, we go deep in our pre-production planning on what we're going to do, etc., etc. And we were talking about following the Coverdale. Well, not following, because that was like 3 podcasts ago, but... other great figures in rock and metal,
the majesties, the overlords, the greats.
The overlords, I like that. Yeah. So, and we were saying, okay, well, we started with Coverdale. We will do more singers, obviously, because they are like the overlords, crying in the rain. Yeah. Exactly. But I thought, well, why don't we flip it and why don't we do one of the great drummers of the rock and metal era? And
when you say flip it, see, these people are they're not the overlords. They're the underlings. There's the old joke, isn't it? What you call someone who hangs around with a musician? Yeah, a drummer. Right. How do you tell when a drummer's at the door? The knocking speeds up. All of that. We're going to do all those gags today. So drummers, pin back your ears. You're going to love it.
Yeah, you're going to love it. Yeah. Most drummers don't know how to operate devices, so none of them will ever hear this. Let's mention that straight away, unless they're hitting it, obviously. Yeah. But no, drummers I think are great because they're even more mental than singers, because singers definitely are mental. I mean, who would want to stand out there thrusting their thrusters at an audience of well-wishers?
Well, I mean, I think that's the myth, isn't it? That the drummer is the stupid one in the band.
He's like the goalie.
Yeah, exactly. He's
not
the goalie.
Good enough to play up front.
On the outfit. Yeah.
But he can go back there and stop people having fun.
And how do people become drummers? That's the thing. You never know, do you? Band's always got one, but where do they come from?
Well, that's interesting.
It's sort of, I know a guy up the road who plays the drums,
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's not like... It's not like, I bought an old acoustic guitar with one string.
Everyone plays guitar, and there are guitar shops, and you go in them, and everyone's playing Stairway to Heaven or whatever it is they play, to practice Enter Sandman or whatever. That's popular, isn't it? Enter Sandman.
Never heard of it. Go on.
No. If you're in a guitar shop, you play that, and everyone looks at you in the shop, going,
and they go, "Hey, is that James Hetfield?
Is that actually him?"
I think that could be him in disguise.
It could be him.
It's him.
But there's no drum shops, are there?
No,
you don't go down the high street. Go, there's a drum shop.
It's sort of chicken and egg as well. I mean, how do you? Because it must cost a fortune to buy a drum kit.
You need a lot
What
of
if you
stuff.
do all that and you get home and you go, bang, bang, fuck this.
See, the other reason drummers always get in bands is because they've got drums. They've always got a car. When you read rock books, all that sort of thing, which I,
or write them, or especially when you write them,
research and write them. You always find, so we hired him because he had a car, so he could get the drums to rehearse. He could get us to rehearsals and that sort of thing. Yeah.
But at the same time, whether it's Keith Moon or John Bonham or Nico McBrain or Tommy
Lars
Aldridge,
stars,
or you kind of killed the headline punchline moment. They're all just batshit crazy, crazier, I think, than any member of the band. And it is because you've got to be mental to want to hit a drum, but also to be stuck at the back. You kind of overcompensate.
Yeah.
And Lars Ulrich, who is the drummer we're going to be talking about today. Lars, okay, cool. We're going to be talking about you, Lars. And whenever he plays a show, he's pretty much standing up the whole time, with both arms in the air.
Yeah. Well, wasn't he the one who made them play in the round? So, in fact, he was not at the back.
Do you know?
He was in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The star of the show.
Yeah. Stars.
Stars. That was one of his nicknames, wasn't it?
That was his only nickname, as far as I know.
Lars has been called many things, but I think Stars was an acceptable nickname.
Yeah.
Because not only is he a star, I'm not going to say groupie, because that would be harsh, but certainly a super fan.
Yes.
I mean, that's who he is.
That's where he came from, yeah.
Right, so let's begin at the beginning. Today, in our occasional ongoing series, Great Figures in Rock.
Yes.
Today we're going to do
Lars Ulrich.
Excellent. Right, now, Lars was born in Copenhagen, Denmark.
See, now he tried to give you the impression that this was off the cuff and that we just thought up Lars. But no, he probably spent the week researching.
Yes, because I'm known for that level. You see, that level of research and investigation. I was going to say Lars was born in Copenhagen in, I don't know what year.
No.
The early 60s.
Yeah, he's probably, late 50s now, is he?
Yeah. Dad was a successful tennis professional.
Yes.
But also a great jazz fan. And Lars once told me that Lars himself had been around the world at least half a dozen times long before he ever picked up a drumstick or thought about being in a band.
Yeah.
Just literally because his father, toured the world at all the major slams.
Yeah, of course he did. And did young Stars avail himself of a racket at any point?
Well, he did, yeah. He, in fact, he was one of Denmark's young tennis stars.
They all say that, though, don't they? It's like they all say that it was Steve Harrison. I was on West Ham's books when I was a kid. They all say that. Is it true? You've written the
definitive. That's the word you're looking for.
Definitive book about Metallica. Is it true? That's what we want to know. Okay. Was he any good at tennis?
Well, right. I mean, not wishing to give any of my books a plug.
No.
Enter Night, official, not official.
No,
Enter Night, definitely not official.
Unofficial.
Enter Night, the definitive biography of Metallica.
Yeah.
You can still get it now. He was, yeah. I mean, he won youth tournaments, and he ended up at the Nick Bollettieri Academy in Miami.
Yes. And there were a lot of players came out of there. But what age would he have been then?
Teenager. Yeah. I mean, that was essentially why. That is the reason why they left Denmark to go and live in America.
Yeah.
The trouble was, as so many kids find, whether it's football or tennis or whatever it is, you're the best guy at your school, you're the best guy in your county, and then you go to one of these places and you find out you're like 150th on the list.
That's right. Yeah,
because there are just amazing, much more
because
talented
at
people.
his age, I mean, I'm just thinking, at his age, you would have been sort of playing Becker, Boris Becker,
Agassi,
Michael
maybe.
Stick, Agassi, Sampras. Yeah, he wouldn't have stood a chance against those. Can you imagine Stars against those guys? Jesus Christ!
Hey.
Six love, six love, six love.
Hey, don't count me out so easy.
Game match, Sampras. Game 7 match.
Yeah, okay, that's a fair point.
He
But
probably
imagine,
he wouldn't beat Serena Williams, mate.
well, yeah, but would Serena Williams
She
be
wouldn't
able to
bother
play
playing
the?
him.
Yeah, but would Serena Williams be able to play the drums
yeah.
on 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse or whatever it was called? What was it called?
I don't know.
Yeah, on the first Metallica album.
I don't know anything about
four-
the first Metallica album. There's no point asking me. I'll tell you a story about
Metal Militia.
I'll tell you about the first Metallica album. I remember being a student at Farnborough Tech, which is where I went before I began my
Which is one of those
magical career.
Which is
in
one of
words.
those elite academies in the UK where such
It's a bit
famous
like Eton
names
College.
as
It's a bit like Eton College. but it's
Eton College?
It's a bit like Eton College, but it's in Farnborough.
Right.
Right. Okay.
So was Boris there with you?
No, he was at Eton College.
All right, okay.
But just up the road there was a record shop, and I remember we used to go in there of a lunchtime to have a look, and I remember going in there and seeing the cover of Kill 'Em All,
Yeah.
which I believe is the Metallica album you are talking about.
I believe it is, yes.
On the front of Kill 'Em All is a lump hammer with some blood pulled around it. Right, that's the cover essentially of Kill 'Em All. I'm not saying they rushed it and came up with the first thing that came into their head.
Or spent all of the $50 budget on it.
That. But that was it. And I actually remember picking it up and going, these guys will never get anywhere. Seriously, I did. We will never hear their name again.
Listen, I never thought they'd get anywhere right up to the 5th album. I mean, to me, if they had become as big as Motorhead, which is basically not that big.
Not that big, yeah.
I mean, big in England.
They were doing well. Yeah.
But I mean,
because a bit more scene setting probably needs to be done. Stars is in the academy, and
so he's in the academy,
getting thrashed by the. He turns up. Even the guy who sweeps the courts is better at tennis than Lars Ulrich.
Although I do repeat, Pete Sampras tried to play the drums on Master of Puppets.
We've got that. We've got
Yeah,
that.
well, I feel like it needed
But that's where we
repeating.
were in the story.
Okay, so
Tennis dreams shattered.
exactly. But at the same time, as happens to a lot of teenagers, in this case, just as he's figuring out he's not going to be the next world number one, he becomes obsessed with rock music. He becomes obsessed with buying LPs, as the older generation still call them. And in particular, heavy metal, rock music.
Yeah.
Now that interest went back to his, when he first started buying records back home in Denmark, and his favourite band was Deep Purple.
Yeah.
But because he came from this very kind of entitled and in Denmark, famous background, his dad took him to the hotel where Deep Purple was staying, and he was able to hang out and get autographs and
Lordy was at the bar riffling his money.
he was. Lordy was at the bar, big wedge of the.
Yeah. But in Denmark, that doesn't wash because I believe, again, research, doesn't Denmark have something like the highest standard of living anywhere in the world or something? It's Denmark or Japan or something. They've got an incredibly high standard of living there.
Right.
So Stars will be, he's like little Lord Fauntleroy, really.
See, that's who he
He's great
is.
at tennis, but
He's great at tennis.
Yeah.
Loves purple.
Yeah.
Knows purple.
Yeah. So he turns up at the hotel.
Turns up at the hotel.
There's the perps at the bar.
And there's Pacey.
Pacey. Because Richie's not there, obviously. We know that.
No, he's in a room with black candles somewhere, communicating
But I bet
psychically with his nemesis, Jimmy Page.
Exactly, yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, well, but I bet Stars is like, woo, can't I say hi to Richie? That would have been his thing.
Well, his
ticking
favourite
off
drummers
the
were Pacey.
so was he drumming at this point? Because I would have thought he would have been very young when Purple were still going.
That's a good question.
Not that I want to piss on your research.
No,
at all,
thanks,
but
John. Well, I'll just have to hang on. Let me
all the
just
stories
rifle
all
through
the stories in that Metallica book are true.
Let me just go through my many pages of backup notes here. Basically, I don't fucking know. But here's the deal.
This is before they went to Florida, maybe. So
yes. Oh no, this is before Florida.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I'm just kind of leaping forward a bit.
Yeah, I've got you.
So we're not here all day in Denmark. Okay. His favourite drummers as a kid were Ian Pace and Neil Peart from Rush.
He's everyone's favourite drummer. I mean,
but it also explains why Lars on those first few albums just couldn't keep a simple beat, but had to
overplay it somewhat.
Well, the very first time I ever met Lars was when they were recording the Master of Puppets album in Copenhagen, and I said to him, and it was a genuine. It's about the only thing I was curious about, about him at the time. I said, how come on all the Metallica songs, just as you get going good, it stops and changes? So you'll be like, dun 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 dun, and he looked at me like it never occurred to him before. But now I realise it was because he could only manage to keep the beat for a few 60 seconds before you go into.
Well, I mean, that we are the sum of our influences, aren't we? That's what's happened to him. He's listened to Neil Peart, and as every drummer does. Yeah, it's a bit like reading Hunter S. Thompson when you're a young, aspiring music writer. All of a sudden it blows your tiny mind. You go, hang on, you can just write whatever the hell you want.
And so I will, only it won't be as good.
Yeah, it won't be as good because I'm not Hunter Thompson.
Exactly.
And it takes a while to get over that and find your own way and your own voice.
It certainly took Lars. It certainly took Lars about 5 albums to learn to hold the beat.
Because let's also just jump back again slightly, because talking of influence and the anxiety of influence, all of those things. The reason I suspect you picked out Lars of all the drummers we could possibly talk about is he has this huge influence over his band.
Well, he's the leader of the band.
He's the leader of the band.
It's his band.
I think this has its roots in what you were talking about, his background and the fact he's now in America. He's very influenced by these bands that he's coming to love. And he's not the kind of guy who just holds back and goes, well, I'll just collect albums and maybe I'll look in the back of sound to see if there's anyone I can trade bootlegs with. He's like, no, hang on, the tour date's right. Get me the car, I'm off. I'm off on the tour.
Absolutely, to the point where I think maybe 17, 18, he flies to London because he's become recently obsessed with the new wave of British heavy metal. So we're talking circa 1980. Yeah. He's mad for Motorhead. And he goes to their office and hooks up and gets to know Lemmy to the point where he then becomes the...
When you say goes to their office, you should point out Lemmy didn't have an office.
Well, no, his manager...
Exactly, yeah. Lemmy didn't go to the office every day.
Well, no, actually, Lemmy did go to the office every day.
Suit and tie.
Not in a suit and tie,
no. Not to work.
He would go to the office every day to order everybody around... to get him his Jack Daniels and his speed, and why aren't you spending more time promoting Motorhead? Yeah. Doug, his manager, I used to have an office literally a few doors away, and you'd see him in there every single day. Doug said his old manager said he would drive us mental. We'd see him strolling up in the afternoon, and we'd go, oh, for fuck's sake, he's back again, those white boots.
Yeah,
he used to send girls in the office to go out and buy the white boots.
Oh, really?
And they'd say, Lemmy, you've got to come and try them on. No, you get them. I'll try them on. They're no good. Oh, you take them back. The white, but don't forget, make them white.
Yeah, got to be with black heels.
With black heels. Yeah, and black on the inside. Cool. Yeah. You don't see it, but you know it's there from the way he walks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the way he talks. So Lars, being this sort of privately educated, Lars was at the Rolling Stones Hyde Park concert in 1969.
He's getting older. I reckon he's in his 60s. Maybe
No,
70s.
no.
Maybe Lars is in his 70s.
This is just the way he was brought up. I mean, his dad was also a jazz musician.
Yeah.
Mother was very into the arts. And he told me that from about the age of 9, he would get himself ready and go to school every day, because every morning he'd come down and be stepping over bodies of all these old hippies that are drunk and stoned and still there from the night before, with Miles Davis playing in the background. And he'd have to go, oh no, and get himself ready and go to school. So he was a rich kid who...
A rich bohemian kid.
A rich bohemian kid with a Danish work ethic.
Yeah.
And a fucking love of heavy metal, particularly British heavy metal. Yeah. So... he comes over, he meets Lemmy. There's a fantastic night where Lemmy has Lars hang out, spend the night with Lemmy. So that there's obviously no going to bed. Yeah. There's just staying up for 2 or 3 days, at the end of which Lars throws up so volcanically that Lemmy literally has to put him on a couch and put a blanket over him and pat his head. But here was the great thing that I always love, is that by the time Lars went back to America, he'd gone back having secured the job as being the president of Motorhead's American fan club.
Right, yeah. A hotly contested position amongst the CEOs of America.
Hotly contested in 1980, not least for the fact that Motorhead hadn't had any records released in America at that point.
Yeah, and no one knew who they were.
No one knew who they were, besides a few aficionados like Lars. They did actually release their first record that year, which was Ace of Spades, and it flopped and died a terrible death. But Lars... got the whole fan club thing together. Yeah. And off the back of that, formed his own group, which in his head was kind of going to be sort of Motorhead-esque, Neil Peart.
Yeah.
How do you say that, Neil Peart?
I believe it's Peart, isn't it? It's like one of those things that he said. He would pronounce it Peart.
Right, but that's a sort of Canadian accent thing,
it
isn't
is, yeah, probably.
It's probably
we all
Peart.
just said Peart. We all said Neil
Peart.
Yeah.
It's Peart.
I think it is.
Peart.
Yeah, for the purposes of this podcast, it's Neil Peart.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Rouge. Rouge. Yeah. Canadian accents, see, I can do them. So... what I love, though, as you said, is that he's the leader of the band.
But there is no band, so where does the band come from?
Well, a school jamming, jamming with like-minded cats.
Yeah.
But the trouble was, there weren't many like-minded cats, because he lives in LA, and everybody at this point is into Motley Crue, Rat, the Greats, the greats of the era. And in fact, very early Metallica, there was a certain kind of flirtation with that. To the point where I think you can find pictures of James Hetfield in like spandex.
Yeah, of course you can. Of course he did. He tries to pretend he didn't. Of course he did.
They were always looking for a proper frontman, though. James was the guitarist who wasn't any good, so he was like rhythm guitar.
Yeah.
Dave Mustaine was the genius guitar player, but also not a proper singer.
Yeah.
And then they had Lars on the drums, who wasn't a proper singer or drummer.
But he was president of the Motorhead fan club.
And he was the one who had the money and the house they would go over to and practice at.
Yeah.
But, okay, we make fun of it, but huge passion. I mean, at the end of the day,
absolutely.
For a guy that couldn't play drums and struggled for many years, he's still the most famous metal drum, one of the most famous metal drummers.
I've ever seen the film. I've seen the end of the Metallica film where he's selling his art collection for about so we can sit here laughing. He had an art collection that went for about $200 million. Didn't he
really did.
That's where drumming got him.
Yeah, I tell you what else. I know we're leaping around here, which is unlike us. We usually stick to a strict,
to the exact timeline
strict
of Lars's
chronological
life.
order.
Yeah.
But seeing as you mention it, in the early 90s, I had spent a lot of time with Lars and Metallica in the 80s and so on and so on. And then by about 93, 94, post-Black Album...
They're too big, frankly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember doing a phone interview with him once for Raw magazine. where you and I propped up.
We bossed.
We propped it up.
Yeah.
And we did a phone interview, right? For fuck knows what, something going on. And literally 3 days later, he was in London. Was having dinner with friends of mine and a famous photographer and one or two others who will remain nameless.
Yeah.
And I could have gone to that dinner, but I was completely, for a moment. I mean, I got it after 2 moments, but I thought, why would we do a phone interview if he's going to be here in 3 days? We might even have dinner. Because you want to see me, you know. I might be at the dinner. Oh, hey, Greg. Yeah, I was hoping you would be here. That's why I only spoke to you on the phone 3 days ago. And after 20 minutes, went, hey, I gotta go. You know. But at that point, I was discussing this with our mutual friend, the famous rock photographer.
Yeah.
And he said, one thing you got to understand, Mick, is that where Lars lives right now, he has a fountain in his courtyard that is bigger than your house.
Wow. Yeah.
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 And I thought, yeah, well, you know, put it into perspective. It's true, isn't it? You know, Lars has moved on.
There comes a point, where bands just of that size no longer need who they formerly needed.
No, they don't. And I am not at all bitter about that.
No, and his art collection, I mean, good luck to the guy. He had a good eye, as they say.
He certainly
He
did.
had a
And
good
I tell
eye.
you,
Basquiat, wasn't it? Basquiat was his big...
absolutely.
Yeah.
But I mean, he had Jackson Pollock, Warhols.
Yeah, but I mean, anyone could get... You know, I think at that point, everyone knew Pollock was worth money. They knew Warhol was worth money. I think he seemed
You're
to
talking
do,
about Jean-Paul Basquiat.
he did extremely well. What is it, Basquiat or Basquet? I don't know. It's a bit like Piet or Pert, isn't it?
Yeah, I think in this case,
When he was
Basquiat.
mincing around New York, no one knew, did they? But the point being, I remember the huge canvas, and he had it in his living room in the house with a fountain, probably. You know,
Yeah.
it's a huge canvas, and I mean, you need a big house to hang a huge canvas like that. But that was the one that went for the real money.
He did. He also had so much artwork. He had them in those special storage containers out in the desert.
Yeah.
But they're at a controlled temperature so that the paintings remain intact.
I think that's a kind of indicative of his character, wasn't it? He had that, you know, as we're saying, he was obsessed by the bands, and he got all their albums to the point where he became a member of the fan club.
Yeah.
He was very obsessive, as we will get to, over Metallica, and micromanaged everything that happened with Metallica. Come the point where he doesn't have to do that anymore. He's collecting art, and he can't just casually collect a bit of art that he likes to hang on the wall. He has to be the guy who's collecting art, and he builds this incredible collection. But I have to say, I really admired him at the end of that film, where he just said it's time to let it go. He sort of decided to let it go, and he let it go. A lot of people can't do that, and I think he was sort of having this kind of, standing with his wife, and they were having this glass of champagne as the money ticked up on the safe.
They were in a private room watching on a screen from cameras, watching the auction.
Yeah, you know, every painting's coming up, is going for millions of dollars, and he's drinking this champagne. But you sort of know that, the money's great, but it's not really making a huge difference to his life. You know, he's not.
He's already in the private room drinking champagne.
He's already got the money. It's like he's kind of having this slightly melancholic moment where he's drinking the champagne, and it's great, but it's a part of his life that he's letting go of. And I thought it was probably the best bit of the film. I've got to be honest. That bit, and the bit where, you know, Hetfield puts them all straight about the hours he's going to work. You know.
Now listen,
I can only work between 2 and 3 now. And then Lars goes, he's a fucking rock band. Well, not he's doing it in the Lars voice, but, you know, he's an incensed because he wants to stay up all night taking drugs still. But Hetfield can't do that anymore.
You've
We've
hit on a
jumped
really,
ahead.
you've hit on a
We've
really
jumped
good.
ahead.
No, because you've hit on a really good point, which absolutely informs why the main reason Metallica became as big as they did, and that is the guy is really intelligent, does have fantastic taste, but is very well brought up, very well rounded. Fame is not this is not a guy who was the lonely guy at school who was the freak and probably would have ended up doing something dreadful and lonesome, but got lucky as a rock star. This guy was born into success. Those material things are important, but that's not the driver. The driver is his intelligence, his personality. And that was brilliant what you said about how he used to collect all the records and then 10, 15 years later it's all the art. Because it wasn't just the records. He was one of the first that got into the tape swapping scene, fanzines, and all this becomes crucial in the very early days of all through their career, but particularly in the early days of Metallica, when they really were considered the runt of the litter. I mean, I don't know how many of their fans under the age of 40 understand this, but Metallica were no hopers. No label in America were remotely interested in them. No promoters. They if they'd had any sense, they'd have put on the makeup and the gear and written songs about girls and chicks and like Motley Crue, like Rat, like Poison, all those groups. And they didn't. They wrote these long, twisty, epic metal, very British, European metal. And hence they became bigger in Britain and Europe before America. But during that period, it's Lars is the guy doing endless phone interviews with some bloke who does a fanzine in Idaho with probably 11 readers or 3 issues and you never hear of it again. No problem. Put them on the list. Lars will talk to them. And it was the same with the business. So that, Metallica's early champion was Johnny Z, who himself was a kind of a outsider.
Very much so, yeah. Didn't it used to be him and Marsha, his
wife, Marsha.
Didn't they start with a market stall of some kind, wasn't it?
Yeah, they had
tape trading on a market stall.
Tape trading, selling records. Johnny Z was actually in prison at the time he first started dealing with Lars. He would call from the payphone at the jail.
Dare I ask what he was?
It's a little bit in the dim and distant, but Johnny, we'll do something on Johnny one day specifically, but Johnny's background was Wall Street.
Right.
I mean, here's this bear of a man from New Jersey who loves rock and metal, the real hard stuff, but had spent his earlier working career in finance and all kinds of stuff on Wall Street. And as happened a lot in the late 70s and early 80s, there was a moment where some of these deals were considered beyond the legal pale. And one or two insiders ended up having to do a bit of
bird, as they say.
A bit of bird.
Yeah.
Nothing too drastic, and I think he was, paroled and all this business. But the fact is, Johnny had manic energy, big love, and when Metallica first came to visit him in New Jersey, he put them all up in his house, him and Marsha. I think him and Marsha already had their first.
So let's just say Johnny has a record label. It's called Megaforce.
Well, it's chicken and egg. There's no label till Metallica come along. And he puts on a show for Metallica in New Jersey, because that's his thing at the time, is putting on local shows, selling tapes. And so it goes from, well, I could sell your tapes and put on a show to, why don't we turn this tape into a bit of plastic and call it a record? We don't have a label. Well, be my label, and we'll call it Megaforce.
Yeah. It's a good name.
It's a great name. But that's what happened. It was, hey kids, let's just do this ourselves. And Metallica literally got in, what do you think they call those things? A U-Haul, and drove across from the West Coast all the way over to New Jersey, thousands of miles, to make this record, do some shows, And of course, it's on that trip that Dave Mustaine literally gets booted out of the band halfway across America.
Yeah.
And again, we will do a whole show on Mustaine at some point.
Yeah.
But needless to say, Dave was an interesting combination of heroin addict, alcoholic, and karate black belt,
yeah.
which is really fucked up and dangerous.
Yeah.
So Mustaine's always killing people, you know, and I think that he finally crossed the line when I think he drop kicked Hetfield or something, who had the temerity to suggest that perhaps the heroin and alcohol could possibly be sidelined while they do
Just for a while.
Just for an hour while we do a show, you know.
Yeah.
So that's. I mean, we're not doing the story of Metallica today. We're doing the story of Lars. But Lars, at that point, he's kind of mentored James Hetfield, who is very insecure, has his own personal issues, very low self-esteem.
Yeah, tortured figure in many ways.
Completely tortured. A complete opposite to Lars.
Yeah.
Lars is short, manicured European, of wonderful sensibilities and background. James, this outdoorsman from the American wild, untamed. I mean, in those days, Trump, you know, Hetfield would have been a sort of what you'd think of if you thought of as a Trump supporter.
Yeah.
He may still be. I have no idea. I don't want to smear anybody.
No. Well, there's again, going back to the documentary, there's the great bit, having said, already told you about all the great bits, there's a great bit where he goes off hunting bears in Russia, isn't there?
Yeah.
And he kills this bear, this massive bear, and then reveals that it's his kid's birthday. And it made him sad to miss his kid's birthday. But he just had to go and kill the huge bear.
In Russia?
That was fucking minding its own business, you know, just come out of hibernation.
You see, it's my kid's birthday.
Yeah.
But
what I really need to do
is to be in Russia in the Arctic
killing
winter,
fucking bears,
absolutely blowing the shit out of some wild Russian bears in 10 feet
Show
of
me
snow.
a bear, buddy. I'll fucking show you a corpse.
Show me a Russian.
Yeah,
bear.
see, it's the Russian thing that got me. I think it was the Russian thing. It was so, as you say, it was like so Reagan-esque. You know, get over those Ruskies. You know, show them that their bears ain't nothing.
While Lars is sitting somewhere sipping champagne, purchasing another basket.
Can we finish this fucking album? Because they're trying to make that album, aren't they? Making a terrible album. Really dreadful. Like
one of my favourites.
One of it, and that poor old Bob Rock's sitting there. I mean, he's getting about $1 million a day, isn't he?
Poor old Bob Rock.
But he has to go. You know, Lars, I'd go, I thought that one was all right. It's this terrible. And Hetfield's going, the same as my life day, the same as my death day. And it's just awful. And you go, hang on, have you guys ever heard the Black Album? Never mind made it. Have you played it back recently?
I'm gonna stop you right there, because for me, St. Anger.
Is that what it was called?
Yes, St. Anger.
Because they have a big thing of trying to think up what to call it.
Yeah, I love that
big
night.
debate.
St. Anger. I mean, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
that's a beautiful thing.
But they've got the guy helping them. The guy who's
the psychiatrist.
He's not a psychiatrist.
No, what is he?
He's a
professional
coach.
He's
a life coach.
Yeah, see, you and I could move into that area.
We should try, because he was, again, getting about $1 million a day and was very, very keen to hold on to it.
He was extremely keen to. We wanted to see the job through.
Every time they tried to sack him, he would say things like, "Oh no, I don't think we're finished yet. You're still very psychologically vulnerable. I mean, look at what happened yesterday. Did you hear what the music you were making? It was, you know."
See, that guy is my hero. He's my hero, and that album is my favourite Metallica album. After Lulu.
Right, when was the last time you played it?
I don't play Metallica albums. I never play Metallica albums.
Yeah.
I just go on Spotify
what's
and
track
play whatever
side 2
of St. Anger.
Yeah, no one knows, do they?
Yeah, but you're not meant to know.
Okay.
You're not meant to know, because it's an immersive experience. As you go into that world of Saint Anger, you leave behind petty considerations as names of songs, or am I really listening to this?
Because James had killed a bear and all the rest of it, and he couldn't come up with any lyrics, could he? So they have a kind of group lyric writing session. And the life coach guy is also trying to write some lyrics because he's thinking, I could get my name on the album here, if it goes well.
Yeah.
And then that's when, God bless him, Kirk Hammett comes up with, today is my life day, the same as my death day.
Yeah.
I mean, what a,
I always knew Kirk had it in him
Kirk
somewhere.
had it in him.
That
And you
hippie
can
comic
see- you
reading,
can sort of
dope
see
smoking fool
Lars-
had the pain in him somewhere.
Lars so wants the album to come out and be good. He's almost, he's doing the best drumming he can over this lyric.
Well, I'm gonna stop you there again.
Yeah, go on.
Because when you say his best drumming,
Yeah.
the sound of the drums on that album sounds like a man hitting a corrugated iron roof with his shoe.
But that was what they sounded like on And Justice for All as well. wasn't it?
Okay. Well, now we are veering.
We're veering slightly. Let's just finish up the origin story and crack on to the getting famous.
So here is James, who is if you could invent in every respect the opposite to Lars, here is James. He's defiantly not European. He loves the image of blood in the snow from a fresh kill. Yeah. His favourite band is Leonard Skinner.
Yeah.
Of course it is.
Who else would it be?
If he was 18 now, it'd probably be
Neil
Kid Rock.
Young, he should remember. The Southern man don't need him around. Don't need him around.
Woo!
Yeah, Neil Young.
Woo!
He should remember. Ronnie Van Zant's going to kick his fucking ass.
That's
when
right.
he sees
Ronnie Van Hetfield.
Yeah,Ronnie had the fucking two-fist, didn't he? Didn't mess about.
Yeah.
So,
and they form a band because
and Johnny Z puts Johnny Z's.
And out comes the first album, Kill 'Em All, which came from a Cliff Burton response to Johnny coming in, because the original album cover was a toilet bowl with a fist coming out of it with a sword.
Yeah.
And Johnny Z comes in and says, guys, we got a problem. Walmart say they won't stock it. And Cliff Burton goes, Kill 'Em All.
Yeah.
And at that point they went,
oh, that's good.
yeah.
Especially James, he's already thinking ahead to the Bears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, it was originally called Kill All the Bears.
Yes.
But they amended it.
And with a little bracket at the start, I will.
Yeah.
And
And in one day.
Yeah.
With my anger.
Yeah.
My saint anger.
anger. And my big gun that I got for loads of money.
So the first album comes out, and it's not,
It's got that song on you were talking about.
yeah.
One with the different bits.
The
Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
I think it was just the Four Horsemen.
Yeah, but they are meant
It's
to
sort of
be
a
of the apocalypse. This is a ridiculous aside, but I remember when we used to travel to LA, when we used to be allowed to go to LA.
Yep.
And there used to be a flight that left London at about 4:00 in the afternoon. And because of the time difference, it would arrive in LA about sort of, 8 at night or something. But you'd had this big gap in it. So you're knackered, but it's just 8 at night. You're just going out. You got to LAX, get in the cab, up the road. On this night, going to see the Black Crows, baby, in LA at the Roxy or wherever it was.
It was the Roxy, I was there. Yeah.
Oh, well, that gig was a very strange one because it was like the Marquee, but in LA. Because I remember, I think Malcolm.
And with some tables.
I was there with Paul Elliott, and the support band come on, and it's the Four Horsemen.
Oh right.
And there were 5 of them. I was so jet lagged. I just remember me and Paul finding this hilarious. Ha ha ha! There's 5 Four Horsemen. So jet lagged. The review had to be in the next day or something. Or the review was just this nonsense about the fact there were 5 Four Horsemen. Completely ignored the Black Crows, who were just on the verge of being fucking massive, But
but what you're missing here is, that's true rebellion. That's rock and roll rebellion.
Yeah.
See, we're called the Four Horsemen.
Yeah.
And there's 5 of us. Yeah, think about that.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Let it sink in. Take a moment.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Pure
rock rebellion. I never thought of it that way.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, so Metallica began to have success in Europe.
Yeah, basically off the back of Kerrang magazine and an array of heavy metal fanzines and that very kind of devoted because long before social media, we always say this because there was more of a world before social media than since. But it was pen pals, small ads in the back of music magazines, and there was a network of people that you got to know through this. So Lars had been swapping cassettes and being completely connected to this community. And of course, unlike in America, which really was, I mean, Motley Crue and all those groups took a while to really have any impact in the UK and Europe. Over here, it was with the new wave of British heavy metal, it was Maiden, Saxon, Motorhead. I mean, even groups like Judas Priest and AC/DC they were in no way LA eyes.
Oh, yeah.
It really was the hardcore stuff. And so they immediately kind of connected more here. And partly that was Lars's Europeanism. And I think also, the other interesting figure in Lars's life is Cliff Burton. Because although Cliff was from San Francisco and James was from LA, San Francisco is, the most European of any American city. And Cliff grew up studying classical music. He also liked to get out the guns and go hunting, but not for bear, more like small birds or
chickens or
tin cans or something like that. Him and Jim Martin from Faith No More. But Cliff was an accomplished musician. He wasn't listening to Motorhead. He wasn't listening to Iron Maiden or the new wave of British heavy metal. Cliff was listening to the Police. He was listening to Kate Bush. He was listening to Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground. He also was listening to rock and metal, but his frame of reference was much broader.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things he really liked about what became known as thrash was because it wasn't your regular metal. It was slightly, in Cliff's mind, avant-garde. It was slightly off. It had to be kind of explained and defended, and you either knew it or you knew nothing.
Yeah.
And that very much appealed to Cliff. But it was his that broader sensibility that I think connected with Lars in a way that I think went straight over James Hetfield's head. I think Kirk Hammett, who becomes Mustaine's replacement, he used to room with Cliff on tour, and Kirk, slightly more hippie background, very open to that world that Cliff absolutely knew. So I think it was those sorts of things that stopped Lars wanting Metallica to be Motley Crue or whoever it was, and made him want them to be something more interesting. Still kick-ass metal, but something just more interesting and elevated, if you like. And so it becomes. So I mean, the first album is essentially playing live in a room and recording it. There are some pretty cool tracks on there. Hit the Lights. There's a couple of first song I ever wrote type stuff. Get to the second album, suddenly you've got anthems like Creeping Death, which you must know.
Oh no, once get to Ride the Lightning, I'm more au fait with it. I mean, great riff, cracking riff.
You missed your cue.
Yeah,
hang on. Yeah, that was yeah. Now you're fucking talking.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the crowning glory of that lineup, Master of Puppets, which was my kind of entree into Metallica. There were so many great new bands in metal bands in the 80s. I just thought they were interesting, but I didn't see them as potential world beaters.
No, I don't think anybody did, in fairness, did they? There's a little movement sort of springing up around them. Their contemporaries, Exodus, probably had made Bonded by Blood at that stage, hadn't they? Which was a very influential record. Slayer had come along.
Mustaine's gone off and formed Megadeth.
So Anthrax were probably coming out of New York at that point. Slightly different sphere of influence as well with Anthrax. Very urban, rap type sound, wasn't it? They had going on. So there's a little scene.
There is, which becomes known as thrash metal.
Yeah, and we should mention at this point as well, Venom, who were initially tied in as part of the new wave of British heavy metal, were ahead of their time, certainly well ahead of Metallica and these other guys, making this absolute racket,
Oh, they were fantastic.
But again, with a certain sensibility, they had their own. They made up names, Kronos and Mantas and Abaddon Abaddon. Kronos was great because Kronos' real name was actually better than Kronos, wasn't it? 'Cause his real name was Conrad Lant.
Yeah.
And I remember if you ever used to phone his house, which sometimes you had to do, 'cause he was a tremendous bloke, Conrad. You'd ring his house, okay, his mum or something would pick up. Yeah. Is Kronos there? Which you feel ridiculous, And you see someone go, Conrad? And he'd come out. But
may I speak to Kronos?
Yeah. But
Conrad! Conrad, you want your food?
But terrific guy, and they very much had this. Sounded like no one else.
They really
Venom
didn't.
at the time sounded like no one else. Played that amazing show at Hammersmith, The Seventh Date of Hell, on the day of a strike or something, wasn't it? No one went.
That was the first time I saw them, and I was absolutely. It reminded me of the very first time I saw Motorhead.
Yeah.
And I can't think of anybody else that impressed me that much first time seeing them. But I've got to mention here, because it's almost like a tradition, it seems. You mentioned how the four Horsemen came on, and there were five of them.
Yeah.
Venom, the 7 Dates of Hell, was actually only 5 days. Two of them got cancelled through lack of tickets.
That happens, doesn't it?
That 2 of them got cancelled through lack of tickets. And then the Hammersmith Odeon, I'll never forget laughing at this. On stage, they had that huge upside down cross with light bulbs around all the edges.
Yes.
Apart from a few that weren't working.
Yeah. and didn't there was some there's something like it was the day of a tube strike or something like that. Something happened.
Something satanic.
Yeah, and in the already sort of reasonably small crowd was reduced even further. But to their credit, it still became a legendary gig.
Oh, totally. I can picture it in my mind right now.
I mean, I have to say the only other, you talking about that effect, I remember the first time I saw Slayer, which was at the Hammersmith Odeon, and I think it must have been on maybe the South of Heaven tour. Something like that. They were certainly approaching their majestic peak, because I always thought they were the best of those bands. Certainly the most single-minded. And I remember walking in. It was that typical sort of Kerrang entrance where you go a bit late. You'd
been in the pub next door.
You go. Oh, let's
with
go.
Neil Murray.
Give them a couple of songs, and we'll go. And walking in. And Jesus Christ, it just hit you. The smell of the crowd, because it was all teenage boys.
Smothered in blood.
Headbanging. And just this noise on stage, this black wind of death coming from the stage, the smell, the sound. And it was just overwhelming. And it sort of pulsed like something truly evil.
Yeah.
It was amazing. On South of Heaven. And it really was an astonishing thing to see. Astonishing. And you had Metallica at that point were doing the same sort of thing, and as you say, Megadeth and Anthrax. And all of a sudden, by this point, it's a scene. It's a definable thing. You can say, well, they are all part of this thing. And we're calling it thrash or death or whatever you want to call it. But
I always liked thrash because no one in America knew what you wouldn't give someone a good thrashing.
No,
in America, and it was Xavier Russell,
of course,
the earliest champion of Metallica, who caught them at a show in San Francisco. And came.
I remember purely because of the tape trading thing, wasn't it? I remember Xavier telling me this story. He was a big tape trader himself,
right?
And was in America on tape trading business.
There you go. Yeah,
he was on tape trade. He used to say he used to book the cheapest hotel he could in San Francisco.
That's very Xavier. Very Xavier. Xavier still to this day has never bought anyone a drink. Can we just say that?
But he and they tape trade. He'd meet his mates who were tape traders. And I think that's how he got invited to the famous Metallica show. I think it was another one of those shows like Venom or Slayer or whatever. There were only a few people there, but everyone that was there was influenced very much by it.
And I think it was that review was the first time Xavier, who was very comical, you know.
Oh, he's a brilliant writer in the respect of didn't care about style or prose or anything like that. What he cared about was he was the one who came up with putting loads of K's in words instead of C's.
He completely took he, as a writer, he was no great shakes, but you had to read him because he was just funny and real.
And knew about the bands, you know. Really.
Totally
he was going to be... Because I remember he wrote one of the first reviews of Marillion as well, which is bizarre. You know, he's like reviewed Metallica, he's reviewed Marillion. He came up with the phrase chicken scratch guitar to describe all Southern rock. And it was
he was a big Southern
Massive Southern rock fan. Massive Southern rock fan.
In fact, I remember spending the night at his flat. You know, in those days, no Uber or anything like that. You just got completely out of control and passed out on the floor. And I remember him pulling out 2 squash rackets and giving me a squash racket so that I could play along to Molly Hatchet.
Yeah, Molly Hatchet.
At deafening volume at about 1 a.m. While we were demolishing a bottle of Wild Turkey, having spent all night in the pub anyway. And he used to write Southern, S-U-V-V-E-R, Southern rock, mate. He's talking like that, Southern rock and fresh. I love a bit of fresh. Well, Xavier was the son of...
Again, he came up with the
that was a famous rock photographer came up with In Order.
Xavier still, I saw him recently. Still to this day, he is saying In Order.
That's because Malcolm Dome was mimicking the famous rock photographer. Okay. And Xavier and Malcolm hung out all the time, so it became a thing that they all said. But Xavier, son of the filmmaker Ken Russell, had been to the private school and boarding education, rest of it.
Well, he was,
and he knew a damn good thrashing entailed. Yeah. And he was the one that described Metallica as thrash metal. I mean, now
it's so good.
Within a few years, you had Thrasher magazine for skateboards. But I swear to God, no one in America had
they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't.
They wouldn't say, "Hey, man, I'm going to give you a damn good thrashing. Big kick. I'm going to kick your ass or fuck you up. Shoot you in the face.
Especially if you're a bear.
No, I'm going to give you a damn good thrashing. Now bend over and take your trousers down."
And Ken Russell would have liked that.
Ken Russell made many films basically around that image, yes. Yeah. So, Master of Puppets becomes their first mainstream hit, really. They've got a deal with a major label in America.
Well, can I just interrupt you very slightly? Did they not... Because I remember there were a lot of machinations about their record deal because they were on Megaforce initially and then Music for Nations over here, weren't they?
When you say over here, you mean like in the UK?
In the UK and Europe. And then did not, and again, I'm sure I remember Xavier telling me this, the first person who came along was in fact Peter Mensch.
The famous manager.
And they had the management deal which then led to the record deal. Is that the right way round, official, unofficial biographer?
Not entirely. It overlapped.
Yeah. I mean, the only other reason I remember that story because I remember Xavier got Peter Mensch to phone Lars at a call box so they could speak because they were on tour or something. He goes, "Ring me at this call box."
And also because Lars decided not to tell Johnny Z because he very shrewdly understood, well, if things go south with this guy Peter Mensch, we've still got Johnny. Yeah. And it was Johnny that did the deal with Elektra, the original deal.
Okay.
So they used to say to Johnny, whenever they needed to speak to Peter Mensch, they used to say, "I've got to call Aunt Sally." Lars used to, "Hey, Johnny, can I use your phone? I need to call Aunt Sally."
And he probably thought that was some sort of drug dealer reference or something. You know?
I think he probably thought they had an auntie called Sally.
Come on. Because there's a lot of Aunt Sallys in Denmark.
Well, no, America at that point. Don't
Yeah,
forget.
no, but Lars's Aunt Sally would be Danish,
Well,
wouldn't you,
yeah,
presumably?
no, that's a fair point. I'd never thought of that, but that's true. But I fear we're going slightly
Yeah, but
off.
anyway, sort of, but there's all these. There's what you're saying is all of a sudden the power of the music business is starting to surround them. Start
So
saying
that-
these guys are going somewhere.
So that Master of Puppets becomes their first gold record
Mm.
in America for over 500,000 sales. That's a huge landmark. I mean, at that point, it was kind of like, well, wow, they've done it.
Yeah.
They've cracked it, because
Yeah.
obviously you couldn't imagine it going any bigger than that.
No.
And they opened for Ozzy on his American tour that year, which again was another signifier, because the previous year, Rat had opened for Ozzy, who then went on to megastardom. The year before that, Motley Crue.
That's right. I'd
went
done
on
the
to
famous tour
megastardom.
with Ozzy. Yeah.
And Sharon Osbourne was really good at that. She'd get whoever was the hot new band to open for Ozzy. And that carried on right through the Marilyn Manson era.
Yeah.
He had Korn opening for him at one point, and so on and so on. So Lars is now probably more in his element, because he's surrounded by millionaires and people that are power brokers in the music business. He's with Elektra, part of WEA in America, which is the same people that Motley Crue were with, and so many other. I mean, the WEA, Van Halen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean,
You name it. And so begins the rise, interrupted really only by the death of Cliff Burton. And while I was researching my book, And Tonight, the definitive biography of Metallica, through talking to people, I was able to kind of piece together this thing, which was, once you sort of think about it, it's obvious. But at the time, it becomes a sliding doors moment, because just before Cliff died, which was on the Master of Puppets tour, but now in Europe, in fact, Denmark, there was talk, very serious talk behind the scenes, about replacing Lars.
wow. Yeah.
Cliff wanted to bring in Dave Lombardi, the Slayer drummer. Lombardo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The 2-footed. I mean, he the fastest and most incredible drummer, Lombardo, wasn't he?
Oh,
amazing drummer. And
absolutely.
When you think about Raining Blood.
Well, can you imagine? I mean, don't forget, Cliff was an amazing
Still
bass
frightens
player.
me, that album, Raining Blood.
Yeah. My favourite was always South.
South.
No, sorry, not South.
Seasons in
of-
the Abyss. The greatest cover line of all time, without a doubt.
on Kerrang.
On Kerrang, from Jeff Barton, give him his credit where it's due. The only man who would have the nuts to put a ludicrous joke like this on the cover of Kerrang. And it's obscure. I mean, you need to even be
You
a
need to
certain
know
age
to laugh.
Yeah. But the cover line was, we had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the abyss.
Still makes me laugh.
It's brilliant. It's my favourite. It's brilliant.
Yeah. There are people all under the age of 50 at this point
Going,
going,
"Oh, I don't get it.
What's
I
that?
don't get it.
What's
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Look up Terry Jacks.
Terry Jacks.
Seasons in the Sun.
Yeah. And listen to Seasons in the Sun.
We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the abyss.
It's one of those. Seasons in the Sun is one of those terrific death songs that's done in a jaunty manner, isn't it?
Written by Jacques Brel.
Oh, was it? Oh, I didn't
Written
know.
by Jacques Brel.
But it's like Tell Laura I Love Her and all of those, isn't it? It's a story song about someone who's
About
about
a
to
dead
die.
person,
Yeah,
about a dead guy or dead girl.
So the cover line was working on a lot of levels.
A lot of levels. Kerrang cover lines did tend to work on a lot of levels.
There's no way did we just think them up off the cuff.
Having a laugh.
Yeah.
Never. So, again, these things
So Lombardi,
we will talk about
Lombardi. So you've got me calling him Lombardi names, Lombardo. You get it right.
That's what you say.
I just want to. Well, it's like I say, it's Neil Peart because it is Neil Peart. But anyway,
Pert.
let's
mate,
get
and
beyond
Lombardi.
the names of these drummers.
Yeah.
And so they were actually thinking of doing away with stars. Cliff was because he wanted someone who could keep up with these amazing bass.
Well, he was an amazing
ideas.
bass player.
Yeah.
And, I mean, truly, Orion, his special moment on Master of Puppets, is built around a bark piece.
Yeah. Simple lines intertwining. Got to get the old
Counterpunctual.
Got to get the old Spinal Tap joke in there.
Now, there's no way of knowing if this is true, but I was told this by quite a few different people that were there at the time. And it makes sense. I mean, I don't think you can now go, oh, God, wouldn't they have been better if Lars hadn't been there? Because clearly that's not true.
Yeah.
But Cliff dying actually, on more than one level, frees Lars, because from that moment on, there will never, ever, ever be anybody with the authority to challenge him.
Yeah.
I mean, Cliff was the big fella, the big figure, the real kind of like the soul of the band in many ways, a fan favourite. James Hetfield was still young and nervous. If you look at the Cliff and All video, most of the time James is on stage singing, he's looking over to his right to where Cliff is. And Cliff ain't looking at anybody. Cliff's doing his thing. And if Cliff hadn't died, and if Dave Lombardo had replaced Lars, Metallica, I think, would never have become the gigantic platinum behemoth they did.
No, they wouldn't have made the Black Album.
But would they have become perhaps one of... I think they would have almost been at the forefront of like a prog metal, or that almost kind of mathematical...
They'd just been like Dream Theater or someone.
But, okay, no, that's a good point. Or, I mean, what are they called, those groups? You know, with that really kind of pneumatic, almost mathematical...
You mean like Tool and people like that?
Yeah. Or Tool meets Dream Theater. Dream Tool.
Yeah,
they would have been a dream tool.
They'd have been I can see that. I see what you mean. That's sort of very technical metal, tech metal.
And I think they would have
come up with something.
I think they've got huge kudos. And I think they probably would have been true kind of Goliaths of that underground in the same way as Slayer, but in a more technical way.
Yeah.
But none of that happened. Cliff did die, and at that point, it becomes fully, I think, Lars's group.
Yeah.
James is absolutely a co-50-50 partner on paper, but there's no doubt that Lars
drives them through this terrible period where they're young men, they're experiencing grief, but I think they've all said subsequently they denied that grief and pushed it down into this terrible hazing of Jason Newsted, who was the guy who comes in and in some ways gets the golden ticket of replacing Cliff, but in some ways is poison chalice of both of those things, because he becomes the outlet for the anger that they feel at what's happened.
The saintly anger.
Yeah, the saint anger.
You might say.
Yeah, well, but and this strange period begins, which manifests itself in a very strange record called "Injustice for All." The reason I call it strange is not because it's not a good record. I mean, there's some tremendous songs on it, but the sound is almost
dreadful.
But it's almost a giveaway of what's happening in the band, isn't it? Because the drums are turned right up.
Yeah.
The vocals are starting to, in a way, take over as well. You're starting to get a bit more singy type things going on in various places. But it's almost like a psychic representation of this very, very confusing thing that's going on.
And there's no bass.
No, that's the other thing. There's no bass. I mean, the new bass player, guess what, guy? You're at the bottom of the mix.
And his nickname is Jason New Kid.
Yeah.
Which sticks to him like mud.
But it sounds all right. I mean, that sounds kind of light-hearted,
But it's not.
But it's not.
No,
it's not.
It really is not. I mean, he becomes like the bitch of the band.
Yeah.
And he suffers. Boy, does he suffer.
Yeah. But that's because they make this decision, rightly or wrongly, that as soon as Cliff is dead, they will just carry on. They will just carry on touring. They will carry on.
What choice did they have?
They didn't really have a choice.
Do that or go back to your day job.
Exactly.
And I love the way it's what Cliff would have wanted. Yeah. No, what Cliff would have wanted was you out of the band.
Yeah.
Lombardo in, and a whole different.
It's another one of those things where you think it would be dealt with very differently today because you would understand more about what people were going through. Back in what year did it happen?
86.
86. Who knew about PTSD? You know, they were all in the crash. I mean, they were, you know, it's not as if, you know,
Lars was
they
on
just,
crutches.
yeah, it's not as if they got a phone call saying, I'm really sorry your mate's died. They all saw it happen. They all knew what happened. Terrifying, traumatic event. But they just chose to brush aside and carry on.
Absolutely, that is what you did. Whether it was a relative dying or a terrible accident or loss of a child or
you just
whatever,
didn't acknowledge it.
there wasn't really much support.
Yeah.
No, I agree, but that album is my least favourite Metallica album. It does have wonderful moments like the track One. I think that's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing Roger Waters would have dreamed of doing on latter Pink Floyd albums. But for me, you know, yes, there's some good moments on it, but it completely it's dysfunctional.
Yeah.
It's crippled in some way.
Yeah.
The whole, you feel the absence of Cliff quite literally. It's not just that there's a new guy on bass or Cliff hasn't had much input into how this record's going to be. It is a complete absence of something. It's like they've lost their soul, or they've lost their... It's like they've gone into the upside down world, and they can't get out. And I think, you know, turning the bass down deliberately is all horrible things Lars and James did. But in a way, I think it's almost as if that was a displacement activity.
You have to say it's a manifestation of what's going on in their heads.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, interestingly, the next album becomes the Black Album, which to me is for me, it's a very much, again, a real... I think that's Lars's first 100% complete control idea. Bob Rock put him through hell with his drumming. I went to the studio when they were making it, and there was a special room, which apparently Lars spent the first 5 weeks of the album just in the room every day, learning to just play a simple beat. Which of course is much harder. I remember Lars saying to me, I used to listen to Neil Peart, and Ian Pace, but I've just spent the last few months listening to Phil Rudd from AC/DC, just learning how to, you know, keep that beat, my friend. But to an extreme, in the same way that And Justice for All was this highly dysfunctional, very strange, disfigured kind of musical statement, the Black Album becomes just as extreme, but in a completely unexpected way. This is Metallica goes mainstream, unapologetically, from choosing Bob Rock, who had just come off doing Sonic Temple for the Cult,
wasn't it?
which was Lars's favourite album.
It was a great sounding record. Sonic Temple sounds fantastic to this day.
Matt saw him on drums. Who by the time they make the Black Album, Matt's in Guns N' Roses.
But I mean, I think, you know, I don't think it's exaggeration to say this was a sort of turning point for rock, because off the back, I mean, you can hear in the Black Album all of those bands that are to come, your sort of Nickelbacks and all of those people who do that kind of. But what it has to me that the other albums hadn't had yet is it has this sense of grandeur and myth. And the way they do that is incorporating that sort of almost mythic America, the cowboy thing. All of a sudden, there's influences of Ennio Morricone. There's these wide-scale, almost ballads, you know, with very simple opening guitar parts, acoustic guitar parts. Brilliant from Hetfield, who all of a sudden finds his voice. You know, you find, this guy can sing, you know.
Yeah.
Wonderful, really good performances, really to the point where they were able to translate that album into a symphonic version of itself, and it still sounds great, and it has this kind of great sweep of the American West about it. That's what it kind of conjures up in my mind. And all of a sudden, they're on a much bigger scale, aren't they? That's what they achieve with that record.
It's an epic.
It is
production.
epic, yeah. And that sort of cowboy thing is very much shorthand for that, isn't it? It's brilliant, because you immediately think of the huge cinema screen with a kind of single lonesome guy going across a vast desert or something, gives you all of that very quickly straight away.
No, absolutely, and achieve something that, do you know, I wouldn't put it past Lars, but knowing him as I did at that moment, because he's a tremendously ambitious guy, and determined and lots of energy. I at that time I would have said, there's no way Lars actually ever sees Metallica becoming bigger than Bon Jovi, because that's not why they exist. He wants them to be more important than Sabbath or something like that, or Deep Purple. But in fact, they achieve this with the Black Album. They become bigger. And I'm saying Bon Jovi because they were the huge mainstream band at the time. Here's a better one, bigger than Def Leppard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. By far. To the point where when they announce, I remember being at Kerrang and going, this surely isn't actually going to happen. When they announced they're going on tour with Guns N' Roses, I mean, this was, you cannot say that these were the two biggest bands in the world at that point.
Yeah.
You know, and that they would do, you know, Guns N' Roses, who were maniacs at the best of times, they would, you know, alternate the headline spot, wouldn't they? One night.
No, I think.
Or did they?
Metallica again. Lars and Mensch, because in the same way that Peter Grant and Jimmy Page were the kind of geniuses behind the strategy of Led Zeppelin, Lars and Mensch were the ones behind the strategy of Metallica, and they agreed to alternate.
Yeah.
But then very quickly, before the tour even started, decided there's going to be so many nights when Guns N' Roses will turn up 2 hours late. There'll be some awful incident, and then we're going to have to go on and clean it up. So they made it so that Metallica always
smart move. Yeah.
They had the same time slot, both 2 hour shows, but sure enough, this becomes one of the most kind of beleaguered tours. Shows cancelled. Axl, I think someone threw a lighter in his bollocks, and for the next 3 shows, he had vocal
I mean,
problems.
he was a nightmare. they were just a nightmare to do. But as an indicator of ambition, to say, right, we're going on tour with Guns N' Roses, the two biggest bands in the world, it was a huge thing.
This is also where Stars comes in, because I don't think Axl Rose ever had a bigger fan than Lars Ulrich. Lars, when they were making Justice, they'd made Justice. Justice was out. Justice is this. Justice is that.
Justice is 9
minutes long. That was already out and a big success. And he was flying home from Europe, home to San Francisco, and he had a cassette of the first Guns N' Roses tracks, the first single in the UK, which was It's So Easy.
Easy.
And Lars told me he's on the plane listening to It's So Easy.
Can I get a chance, please, me, baby?
And that bit where Axl goes, why don't you just
fuck off? That's amazing, that bit.
Well, Lars was like, oh my God. And at that point, you have to remember, Megadeth were considered the baddest, most rule-breaking, fuck you kind of thing. He said he heard that and he thought, oh, that's us being nudged down to number 2 at this point. This guy and this band have taken over. And he became obsessed with Guns N' Roses to the point of, talking to Mike Klink, who produced Appetite for Destruction, talking to him about producing Metallica. And of course, famously, in the Paradise City video where you see Axl Rose in a white leather Guns N' Roses jacket with Guns N' Roses on the back, there were actually 2 made. They shared the same merchandising company. And Lars asked them if they could make a second one so that he could wear it.
See, he's never been afraid to be a fan, has he, Lars?
No,
It's amazing.
He is the
star.
ultimate fan.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it's...
So you've got Axl in his white Guns N' Roses tour jacket, only one ever made.
Yeah.
Apart from the one
made
for Lars.
Around it.
Oh dear. How we laugh.
Yeah.
And then one time I was staying in the Sunset Marquee in LA, and it was after the Use Your Illusion albums had come out and Get in the Ring and all that. And Axl was staying there as well. But Lars had come to visit, and many drinks ensued, great hilarity. And then at about 2 a.m, I literally got to the point where I said, look, I just got to go to bed. So just went to bed in the hotel room. Because, the Marquee had those sort of apartment style.
Yeah.
And Lars said, okay, well, I'll just go. And he opened my hotel room door and he stuck his little head out just to check the corridor, just in case Axl was walking out. Because he didn't want Axl to see him leaving my room.
In the jacket. No, what he should have done was he should have waited you to go to sleep and put the jacket over you. Just and then looked for Axl and said, Axl, come and have a look at this. Not only is it Mick Wall of Getting the Ring, he's got your jacket.
He's got your jacket.
You thought there was only one, but he had one made. Why? He was going to wear it tomorrow when he saw you.
Yeah. Why don't you kill him?
Yeah, in the jacket.
Yeah, we'll write another song called In the Jacket.
Yeah.
Whose jacket
Get
is
in
it,
the jacket, motherfucker.
Get out of the jacket, motherfucker.
Get out of the jacket. My jacket, you motherfucker. You copying motherfucker.
Ripping off the clothes shop.
Yeah, the clothes that Axl wants to wear.
Lying to the kids about whose jacket that is. Get out of the jacket, motherfucker.
Yeah. That's just typical Lars. What a plan. Because then he rids himself of his two great enemies in one go. Exactly. Not only is Mick Wall dead, Axl's off the scene in prison. Probably.
There you go. Him and Charlie Manson.
Yeah.
His idol.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to skip a little bit because we're starting to use up unusually for us.
We've gone on for a bit too long. Let's start talking about the film and all of that stuff, because that was great. The falling apart.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it's about the perils of success, isn't it? I mean, you become. It's like a black hole. You become so big. You create so much inward gravity that it has to fall in on itself.
Okay, but just before we go there, just to say, after the Black Album, the commercial move was to do Black Album 2.
Yeah.
What did they do? They responded to grunge, cut their hair, started wearing makeup, and recorded Load, which sold about.
I don't even remember that album.
Why would you? You're only the editor of one of the world's best-known rock magazines
I was out of it
at
by
time.
That point. Was this after 1996?
No, this is 94, dude. When you were the boss of a little magazine called Raw.
They recorded an album called Load.
You really don't know this?
If you said to me, what's the follow-up to the Black Album?
Okay, what was the follow-up to Load?
Well, I do. Now I've remembered, because Load was so bad, they went in and did it again, and they called it Reload.
Well, I'm going to stop you right there, because I like Load. I
want to say something else.
Go on.
But you like all of the. This is because he's so desperate for stars to hear this podcast and go, oh my God, this man understands me. You love all of the terrible Metallica albums.
No, the most adventurous, because here's my point, okay? In terms of pure Metallica, I'm a master of puppets, man, okay?
Right.
Black Album, Justice, what a track. I mean, wow, and a couple of others, but mainly one. Black Album, Enter Sandman, Nothing Else Matters, I really liked at the time. And what was their Kashmir? What was that? Sad But True.
Sad But True.
I remember Lars saying to me, hey man, in the studio, we've done our own Kashmir. Yeah. I was like, really?
Yeah, good.
No, seriously. I said, play it to me. No, you got to wait. Anyway, I finally heard it. How did it go? Dun, dun, dun.
All I remember is the big sad but true.
But it was a plodding kind of dun, whatever. So Load is everything the Black Album isn't, but it's also everything nothing they've ever done is. A friend of mine in the promotions business told me that the day the posters went up for their Paris shows in France, with them in the makeup.
I do remember that.
And Kurt smoking a cigar.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
He said that was the day they wanted to do 3 nights at the big Enormo Dome. That was the day it went down to 1 night.
Yeah.
They literally
Yeah.
lost 2/3 of their fans.
Yeah, because let's be honest. I mean, you're talking about the casual fan. Yeah, the people who only own the Black Album. They don't buy the back catalogue or anything like that.
But if they hadn't made those moves, if they hadn't done Load and Reload, I do think it enabled them to at least be acceptable to check out by the grunge nation. Because they did some great videos for those tracks. And there were some really good tracks and some not so good. If they hadn't done those, if they hadn't done the movie,
Yeah.
which no sane... I mean, can you imagine Bon
No,
Jovi...
it was a ridiculous thing to put out because it made them look, they were huge rock stars and it made them look fallible and human.
But just ahead of the reality TV
Yeah,
curve.
yeah,
This
yeah.
was before the Osbournes.
It was. Oh, yeah, yeah.
This was unimaginable at that moment, and they did it. And then, of course, the crowning glory, the album with Lou Reed. Now, here's my 2 points: is Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Slayer, Megadeth, Guns N' Roses. No other fucking band of that genre would ever even think of trying to do any of those things. Now, whether they worked for whoever is listening or watching, whether they go, oh God, this is terrible, or how could they, it becomes a conversation piece. And to me, those are the things that turn you from being a great band into a legendary band. I mean, the sheer cojones of teaming up to do an album with Lou Reed. I mean, Cliff Burton would have loved that.
Yeah.
Which is a weird irony because diehard Metallica fans, the fundamentalists, see Cliff. He's like their Ayatollah. He's the true metal. Cliff loved Lou Reed, and of course they can't put that together. Load. I mean, we all laughed because it was such an obvious play for the new post-grunge market. But unlike, say, Def Leppard and Bon Jovi, who just cut their hair short and made power ballads and put out greatest hits and just hope for the fucking best. Or, in fact, in Def Leppard's case, they did Slang in about 94, 95, which was their attempt to say, we're Def Leppard, but not that old Def Leppard.
They weren't with Mutt Lange, where they,
And it wasn't very good.
No.
And maybe Load wasn't all that good either. But it seemed to be more of a statement from them. It really seemed, I mean, it was...
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, the Black Album was unfollowable because it's always going to be the biggest album of their career. Those phases only ever happen once to a band. So you're right to go off and do something that's, ostensibly became art rock, really, by the time it got to Lou Reed, was an interesting thing to do.
And I think that's Lars. Lars.
Oh, you can see him in the film. You can see him driving that forward.
Because also, I remember in the 80s, before they became obviously cool, this is Justice Tour, they would be featured in Time Out magazine in the UK, which Time Out is, it's too cool for school.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get any rock in there whatsoever, but you did get Metallica. They were seen as a very interesting cultural development on the art scene. They would get features in the Village Voice in New York. This is before the Black Album. This is, they're kind of saying this, we all know what heavy metal is. It's a joke. It's a laugh. This group here are doing something with it that's actually very interesting.
Yeah.
And they always had that cachet. And no other rock band, I think Guns N' Roses could have, but blew it really.
But yeah, they just became massively pompous and overblown.
And also Axl was a hick from the sticks, whereas Lars was a sophisticate.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that's what stopped Metallica becoming status quo of thrash or Iron Maiden of whatever genre they're supposed to represent.
I agree. If they made an album tomorrow, you couldn't necessarily say what it was going to sound like, which is a recommendation in many ways.
Well, for me, when they do make the Just What the Fans Want album, which they did with Death Magnetic. The worst title.
I'll tell you about that in a minute. Go on, you.
Well, they released Death Magnetic as I was finishing up my book on Metallica. Enter Night.
Yes.
Beautiful, definitive biography. You must get it. That's what they're all saying. Everybody's saying.
And if you do get it, that's what the audiobook sounds like. It's great.
What were we saying? I've lost my drift.
You got to Death Magnetic. Oh, I'm going to...
Okay. Here, my last thing. Death Magnetic. Fuck me. I tried so hard to like it because it really would have fitted beautifully for the end of my book.
Yeah.
You know, they've
come back.
Yeah, they've done St. Anger. Tremendous album. Tremendous album. Everybody tells me, drink bleach and listen to St. Anger.
Yes.
They've done the movie. They've done the orchestral, symphonic. They've done the covers album. You know, they've done it. They've done a million things. And now comes Death Magnetic. And it would have been a beautiful ending if I could have said, and here we go, come full circle.
Full circle, yeah.
An album Cliff would have been proud of.
Yeah.
That's the headline you're looking for, right? It was rubbish.
Terrible, yeah.
Absolutely. And did you see him on that tour?
No.
They had
God,
coffins. No. Coffins, for fuck's sake. How Spinal Tap could you get in the year 2010 or whatever it was, you know? Yeah, sorry, so you were going to say.
What I was going to say is, I thought of this actually as you were speaking. I wonder if the film, because it revealed the sort of tortuous process of trying to make this record, and in the middle of the film, for anyone who hasn't seen it, Hetfield goes off to rehab. His life ostensibly changes overnight once that's happened. He comes back a different man. He's not drinking, he's straightened himself out, he's spending time with his wife and children, all admirable things, but part of his rehab is he can't work long hours, he can't expose himself too much to the things that had caused him to drink in the first place. So he's a different guy, and you get this conflict between him and Lars, because Lars still wants to record all night and do the things that... And says, Hetfield won't have anyone drinking around him. And Lars says, why can't I have a beer? And so the two stags of the band are knocking heads. They're getting a new bass player at this point because they've not got one, because Bob Rock is playing bass on the album. They employ this new bass player. Where does he sit in all of this thing? There's poor, dear, lovely Kirk, who's just basically a kind of stoner surfer guy caught in the, he's the lukewarm water between the fire and ice, Yeah. When you see the film, you understand why they can only conceivably make a terrible album, because everything is wrong. Everything's wrong. There's no creativity from Hetfield because he's head somewhere else. He's not in the game particularly. Lars is the drummer. Lars can't, as great as Lars is as a drummer, he can only hear someone do a riff and go, it would be great if you did it like this. It'd be great if you did it like that. He can't pick up a guitar and go, no, this is what I mean. Kirk is off. I don't know what he's doing. The life coach guy's trying to write lyrics. They've found some bass player. They give him $1 million in this great grandstanding gesture.
Yeah,
it's all mad. It's mad, and that's why.
And that's why St. Anger was a masterpiece.
Well, it just wasn't. It's just not memorable, is it? It's
When you said Bob Rock was on the bass, it reminded me of the extraordinary sound of the bass on that record, which is really kind of. That sort of thing. Love it. Yeah. Love it.
Because I mean, Bob Rock is
with corrugated iron drums.
By the end of it, Bob Rock's fucked off, isn't he? I mean, he's getting $1 million a day or whatever.
He never worked with them again.
Yeah,
never.
It's not worth the aggravation that he had to go through. But then, as you said, I'll tell you, Death Magnetic, right? As you say, I kind of had
Death Magnetic.
a sort of blank period in my music biz days where...
Was this when you were institutional?
I was out of the game from 96 till probably you were back at Classic Rock and very kindly offered me some things to do.
I wasn't back.
Well, no, you invented Classic Rock.
There you are. I didn't say that. He did.
Yeah, I was back. You were at Classic Rock. I was back. Anyway. And... through whatever, I can't remember. Would you like to review the new Metallica album? I said, of course, said yes. Because if when you're a review, you always say yes because you think,
And also,
at least
you know,
I'm
it's
going to
going
get
to be
paid this month.
Yeah, and it'll be a big
and
review.
it'll be a big review. So yeah, okay. Phone Kaz Mercer, their long-time press officer over here, and she will arrange for you to listen to the album. Great. Okay. Phone Kaz. Yes, we've hired a lovely hotel room. There's all these things again. There are several people coming along. You can come at 4 o'clock, or you can come at 5 o'clock, or whatever. So, we're doing them on the hour because there's tremendous interest. I mean, it's Metallica. It's not just the rock press that want to hear. As you say, by now they're the heavy metal band that you can write about in the Daily Telegraph. You can write about them in Time Out. You
BBC
can
Darlings.
you probably write about
Glastonbury on the horizon.
Yeah, probably Gardener's World are doing a Metallica feature. Who knows?
Hunter's Weekly. Bloodsport Monthly.
Yeah, it would.
Gunshot.
I think, is it not called The Field magazine? I'm sure they'd be hugely interested in James Hetfield's bear-killing exploits.
Sharpshooter. This month's issue of Sharpshooter.
And Backstreet Heroes and all of those. Anyway, so I go to it and go to this hotel, go in, and there's me, and there's the Telegraph over there, a few guys, and everyone's in there, and Kaz goes right. And if I'm sure I remember correctly, the album was produced by Rick Rubin, wasn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah,
which was this big thing of like, they're now with Rubin, and Rubin's exactly the guy. He understands rock, he understands metal. He's going to bring them back.
The Sabbath comeback album.
Yeah, Johnny Cash. He'd done the big Cash comeback thing that everyone had loved because
AC/DC.
Yeah.
So he was the guy that would bring back the classic.
The classic
sound.
Ignoring the fact that Rubin never had a classic sound. He always sounded like Rick Rubin, which was that very kind of dry, production-y type thing that he used to do. But so we get in there. And God, you know how loud they turn it up at these fucking things. Kaz comes in, puts it on, turns it up, and she's out the door, shuts the door, and we're all just sat there, like making that, because she said, you can't have a tape of it, you've got to make notes or whatever, So we listen to it, and it goes on and on. I mean, it's about an hour long. Top volume. It's like a drill going, and everyone's just looking at each other and kind of writing the odd note.
Very loud.
Yeah, this one's extremely loud.
Goes on a really long time.
Next one, even longer, even louder. And it gets to the end. Like when you get to the end of a long plane flight or something, and the engines turn off, but you can still hear the engines. But it's nice that they've turned off. It's like that. And Kaz comes back in. And she looks at us all and she goes, does anyone want to hear it again? Literally to a man, everyone stood up and went, nope. And we're out that door faster than I've ever seen anyone leave an expensive, lovely hotel room. It was just, nope, out off we went. It was terrible.
You see, I'd take some anger over Death Magnetic.
Oh, so would I, because it's shorter.
Day of the week.
I mean, it's shorter apart from anything else.
And it is, of course, a great artistic statement. That reminds me of an almost exact same story for the Metallica album.
Right.
Metallica and Lou Reed, or Lou Reed and Metallica. Lulu. Kaz Mercer, same London-based PR for the band. Same deal. We had to give in our phones.
Yeah, all that
in a box.
Because obviously one thing we didn't say, and I won't interrupt you for very long, was Metallica were at the centre of the whole anti-piracy thing right at the very start with Napster, weren't they? Which was the whole row.
That was. We should mention that because that was I'm sure he regrets that.
Well, they were both right and wrong. I mean, I think Spotify. A friend of mine who I was trying to, for whatever reason, share a playlist with him. His wife's a musician, and he won't have Spotify because. And he laughs about the fact he's kind of making a stand about it, but it's terrible for musicians. You have to have, you get sort of 30 million plays, you get a check for 50p in the post. It's awful. See, and this was what Lars was kind of, as the digitalisation of music happened, this was the point he was trying to make. Every artist should own the rights to sell their stuff.
And because he's Lars, he's articulate, he's connected. Yeah. I go on TV, he's suddenly live in the courtroom.
Yeah.
Because he's a man with a cause.
Yeah.
And as you say, at that moment in history, I mean, what do you mean albums would cost fortunes in those days.
Oh, to make, yeah.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
And promote.
Yeah.
Don't forget, this is pretty much 20th century thinking here.
Yeah.
You spend shitloads on an album, put out an album every 2 years at the most, then tour like fuck,
Yeah.
spend millions on videos. That world's vanished. But at that time, Lars is like, well, we're committing all this, and we're just going to give you the album for. I mean, it just didn't make any kind of sense.
Yeah.
So I was going to say that was a black spot for him, but actually, again, I think it just illustrates the intelligence of the guy, the willingness of the guy to go right to the line.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember many other heavy metal. I don't remember Kerry King getting up and making any
That's
statements.
right, and it was crazy because everyone, that's what led to the downfall of the music industry. I mean, it's rebuilt itself now as this ostensibly a live operation.
Yeah.
And now COVID's finished that. But, he was right. He was right because this stuff ended up being given away.
Yeah. I know. I mean, I think, again, that's another podcast because
we're sidetracked.
Much I need to say on that.
You're with Kaz Mercer and you're off to hear Lulu.
Okay.
And you've handed your phone in.
And I think this will be a good, not the last story we will tell, but this is a good way to sort of finish this one because, again, I see the whole Metallica as an indication of the genius of Lars Ulrich. I really do, because James Hetfield would not have really fucking known or cared who Lou Reed was or used to be or whatever. Kirk, I'm sure, would have been aware, but I don't particularly. Kirk loved Hendrix, and I don't see the Velvet Underground or Lou Reed figuring prominently on his radar. As for the bass player, I mean, I don't see a Lou Reed fan there particularly. Could be wrong, but what I do see is Lars Ulrich in his endless pursuit of not just, as you say, it's not the money. The money, yes, of course, but he comes from money. So
he's always had money.
He's always had money. This is not some kid off the estate. This isn't Axel, a juvenile delinquent with childhood abuse issues, coming off the fucking farm with a piece of grass in his mouth and then ending up in LA and running away scared. Complete opposite of that. This is a brain, a sophisticated jazz, art, superstar, tennis, grew up in a bloody castle, for fuck's sake. He sees the bigger picture. So, of course, money, but credibility. The Rolling Stones haven't made a good album in 45 years, but they will always be the Rolling Stones. And always more famous than Led Zeppelin, who sold shitloads more records than the Stones, because of Mick Jagger. Because Mick Jagger knew how to appeal to people that would never identify as diehard Zepp or Stones fans. And Lars the same. And I think the reason, they get asked to headline at Glastonbury, which is the coolest festival in the UK, possibly, it's one of those, I don't think there is an equivalent in America or anywhere else.
I don't think there is really, no. It's a kind of weird cultural English thing.
And it is massive. And the BBC spend all weekend there, 24/7 coverage. The bands themselves get paid way less than they would normally get, just for the privilege of doing Glastonbury. And who was the headliner on a Saturday night a few years back? Metallica. In the wake of the Lulu album. Because the Lulu album was written about in The Guardian and the broadsheets and the BBC and Mojo and all these cool places by people that know exactly who Lou Reed is. And he's on the Mount Rushmore of alternative rock. And he's doing this album with this, one of the coolest metal bands. What's not to like? But the metal fans who really have no clue who this fucking Lou Reed is, other than he's spoiling everybody's fun. He can't even sing. It's like one of those. They hate it. Now, I'm sure Lars, I don't think he realised just how much they would hate it, but in the same way as when he did the Black Album, the same way as when he did Load, the same way as when he did the movie or St. Anger, I just think he knew it was a genius thing to do so unexpected. So and for my money, I still think, no, I don't play it every day. I don't play music. I've got 3 teenage kids. They play music.
Yeah.
I play whatever I'm working on, you know. For me, it is a magnificent musical statement. But the first time I heard it was in that, probably the same. It wasn't the Sanctuary Hotel you went to.
I can't remember where it was. It was maybe around,
Soho?
No.
Okay.
Kensington, I think.
Okay, well, a few years on when it's Lou Reed, it's this place in Soho, and we have to drop off our phones, and it's just like you said, it's not just, you know, Metal Hammer and classic rock. It's The Guardian, The Times, The Telegraph, the BBC, the World Service. And we're all in there, and Kaz puts on the CD, turns it to fucking deafening.
Why do they think you want to hear it that loud?
I don't know, but it's awful.
Unless it's to stop you talking over it.
Yeah, maybe.
You know, because if you see your mates, what do you think? You know?
Well, when I first got in the business in the late 70s, there were always album listening practically every night or every week. And you'd go because you'd see your mate.
Yeah, it was just a drink, and they'd have it on in the background.
They'd have it on in the background.
Deafening you.
They knew that if everybody got pissed, they had a brilliant time. They would all go,
I heard it last night, it's brilliant.
Fucking fantastic.
Yeah.
I was at the listening party.
Yeah, it was amazing.
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
No, we had to sit in a chair. We're not even allowed to, you know, take home a copy or anything. Make notes while this fucking assault goes on. It's an assault. And those, what was it, 65 minutes long or something? I mean, you're there a long time. Even longer and even louder. And particularly the last track, what's it called? Something Dad?
I know.
Bad Dad? Something weird like that. And it goes on for 9...
Was that written by the life coach?
It's like 19 minutes long. And about 13 minutes of it is just pure sonic noise. Of course, we mustn't forget that, you know, Lou Reed, the father of that in many ways, the Metal Machine music. And there was a famous Velvet Underground track called Sister Ray, which went on for like 17 minutes. And it is just basically proto-thrash metal. And at the end of that, we come out, and of course, there's a lot of metal journalists there. And me and the metal journalists all go to the pub to sort of do a post-mortem. And do you know what, John? They were angry.
Really?
Yeah, they were fucking pissed off. Metallica had betrayed the faithful.
Yeah, you can see that.
I mean, even Alexander Milas, who was then the editor of Metal Hammer, and still very much on the scene, very good writer. I still like Alexander very much because he's intelligent, he's smart, he gets it. Even he didn't really like, even, you know, he just felt it was, you know, a step too far. Didn't like it. Fair enough. I mean, it's not the most likable record in the world. But what it seemed to me that they most of all objected to was the fact that it even existed.
Yeah.
And as I tried to say, give them some kind of context in terms of Lou Reed, they were like, we get it, we just don't like it. You know, and that became kind of the metal fans, just stop telling us we don't get it. Well, they didn't get it, but they definitely didn't like it. And I always thought it wasn't a case of getting it as letting it, you know?
Yeah.
Why not?
Did Hetfield like it?
Good question.
Yeah.
See, that's a good question. Did Hetfield like it? Did Trujillo like it? Kirk, who knows? I think Kirk's happy to roll with it.
Maybe he's forgotten it. He just,
but Lars,
just don't know.
I'm sure Lars loved it.
Oh, Lars would, I'm sure he would have done, yeah. But did you say he would see the avant-garde nature of it? He would see it as a project, as just another... Yeah. Because he's got the context of the art and the, you know, we think about an artist's career, the different phases they'll have, their red phase and their blue phase or whatever.
Yeah.
Times they'll only paint the same door 57 times or something.
But isn't that remarkable that at that stage of the game, when they are now, you know, I don't know, when did Metallica come out? A few years ago now. So they're probably all 50 at this point, something like that.
Yeah.
Zillionaires. You know, absolutely still one of the absolute biggest touring bands in the world.
Probably the biggest, you would think.
Absolutely no need to even make another Metallica album ever again, let alone, hey, let's get together with Lou Reed and make an album that will entirely confuse and piss off our staunch fan base.
Yeah.
Possibly damage our reputation with that fan base. In the same way that Load did, or the wasn't Spotify, what was it at the time? Napster. You know, these kind of seemingly careless moves, to me, all come from Lars's big brain, his broader cultural background. And that is why he'll be the first to... Last time he rang me, he left a message going, hey, it's your favourite drummer. He's so funny. He knows he's not the world's greatest drummer.
Yeah.
But he might just be the world's greatest heavy metal genius.
Well, I think he might... Because I suppose the other thing we should mention before we close on that is we talked about him always having that sensibility of a fan. If you look at the way Metallica have curated their fan base, they have a magazine, which I think our old chum Stefan Chirazzi puts
Stefan
out.
Cheeseburger. I never called him that, but that was his name, wasn't it? Rightly so.
Stefan...
I don't think that you do. That's what you said.
No, I don't know. Stefan,
I like him.
I do. He's a great man, Stefan. But he and was also a great chum of Lemmy's, wasn't he? You know, he was. So I suppose
still is.
Yeah,
Stefan. On a serious note, Stefan still works with the Motorhead organisation.
Yeah, he's just done the sort of commemorative Ace of Spades or something, I think.
That's it, yeah, absolutely.
He's curated all of that, but he is involved with the Metallica fan magazine stroke. I mean, it's an empire. It's not just a magazine, is it? It's a huge empire of their fans. But the hand of Lars is always there because he had that background of a record buyer, a tape trader. He understands what people want. And if you look at Metallica's, the quality of the stuff they've always produced, yes, they do all the different tour T-shirts and all of that. They're not afraid of making a pound note. But they were the first to do the box. Remember the box that they did?
Live Shit, Binge and Purge.
And it was one of the very first box sets that was not just a cardboard box. It was a sort of metal container, you know.
Now we're getting to it. They also, before that, I mean, that was genius. But before that, the one that took my breath away was Cliff 'Em All. The video, it was in the days of you bought a VHS cassette.
Right.
Long form video, as it was known. And that came out 2 or 3 years after Cliff died. I'd have to look it up. But it was very much kind of after the fact. And it was and Metallica never made any videos until after Cliff died. The very first ones they made were for the Justice album. And they again, this is Lars, very shrewd. They turned it into a thing of we don't make videos, right? Because they knew no one would fucking play them anyway. They knew it was like we don't release singles because no one's going to play it. It won't sell. But you turn it into we could, but we don't because we're different, right? Yeah. But they got together all these bootleg videos that fans had taken. Or maybe one of their crew had taken on one of those little Cine 8 things. No cameras, no digital video. This is literally just old bits of film. They were like, you see it on like YouTube now, you know, but you get a clip someone in a balcony with a really shaky, and then another one right up close on the stage. And bits where they were on tour going into a shop to buy beer at night and all this. And they called it Cliff 'Em All. Brilliant, just brilliant. And that video became absolutely one of my all-time favourites of that era. There wasn't one professionally shot inch of footage on the whole thing. And it was an absolute masterpiece because, and I, as you know, I worked in that sort of genre, that medium at the time, and it was all about making it perfect. You know, you got to get the light and, oh no, that's no good. You can't do that. The sound is a bit weird. Well, no, you can do it.
Yeah.
You can do whatever the fuck you like. Yeah. We're Metallica. We do whatever the fuck we like.
Yeah. And
And who's the genius behind that?
Yeah, Lars. And so I think all of that stuff is worth mentioning because they've always paid attention to that and they've always given their fans, the value. The other thing I would say, while we're on the road to praising them, because we've always had our fun with Lars. Let's be honest, he's always been a slightly comic character in many ways for all of those reasons of being a super fan and the Danish accent, which slowly over the years has become this kind of Southern California Danish accent, and everything else that goes along with it. But the other thing they did, and they have always done this well, is pay tribute to their roots when they went off and made Garage Days Revisited, things they've done several times, and actually made a check for some guys who could use the money.
Absolutely.
They covered songs of bands who, Budgie, for example, I think Lars had always, just bands they'd always liked and who probably needed a few bob. And if Metallica cover one of your songs, you're going to get a few bob, let's be honest.
No, absolutely.
You're going to get a nice little pension out of it. And they always did that. And I'm sure I understand they've done plenty of charitable things that you never hear about. They've got a foundation, haven't they? I think that rewards kids and they'll look after people because they've got a lot of money. And it's easy to say you do it because you've got a lot of money, but only the people who've got a lot of money can do it. And
no, absolutely,
fair play that they have done.
And at that point, you've made really eloquently about him maintaining that connection with the fans. That runs through everything they've ever done, right up to the present day. Even to the point where in the early days of mosh pits, they were the first band where you could actually buy a ticket.
Oh, that's right.
To practically be on the stage in your own special area. When I saw them on the Death Magnetic tour, they were playing in the round at the O2 Arena. And I've obviously seen Metallica many times over the years, and that was one of my least favourite concerts. I just didn't work for me at all.
Too long, too loud.
Too long, too loud, and too many coffins. I just thought, this is so cheesy. But...
Were they magnetic?
I'm sure they probably were. Well, that's probably how they were on the lighting. They were just magnetised. They're just magnetised. At the end of the show, something happened that I have never seen, an in-the-round show. It's all over. They've done the encores, all that business. And now they should have been snuck off somewhere and that's it. Like the house lights are up, people are leaving. They came on stage and they literally stood there talking to people.
Oh, wow.
It's not like it's part of the show. The lights are up, people are leaving, and they're like doing this and bumping, fist bumping, and they're on there for ages. And I'm thinking, and people have now started to come back because they see them on there. I'm thinking, this is really interesting. And it goes on for about 20 minutes. And I'm thinking, I love this. It's kind of a weird blend of the grandeur of the show. Because we're coming on to the Ennio Morricone Fields of Gold.
The ecstasy of the gold.
Sorry, that's it, yes. Not the Sting song. No. Never ever make that mistake.
No.
Did you notice my deliberate? I was hoping to lure you in so that you agreed and then catch you with an aha. You see, there's a grandeur, and yes, there's a humour, and yes, there's an earthiness, and it's kind of a cross between we are metal gods, but also we're not out of your reach. We're still you. Kind of went even further. It was completely sort of, I'm sure they did it every night, but it had a completely unscripted feel.
Yeah.
A completely lo-fi. We've gone back to being some band in a club. And I remember, you mentioned the Black Crowes earlier. I was on a few shows of the Black Crowes on their first tour when they are doing clubs. And they got to San Francisco. And who turns up? Lars. And at this point, this is 1990. So Metallica have had the huge top 10 album with Justice. They've had the mega credible one with Master. They are probably the most important metal band in the world at this moment. And he just turned up, no bodyguards, no nothing. And people going, hey man, cool band. He's like, hey, sure, thanks, Just a guy.
Yeah.
And you got to love that.
Yeah.
You know, Slash, God bless him, if he'd have turned up at that show to see the Black Crow, a tiny club, there would have been at least 2 bodyguards. You know, there would have been some sort of acknowledgement that someone very important is here and don't come near him. And people didn't even notice Lars in the corner of the dressing room until they went, "Oh, hey man, good, cool band." He's like, "Yeah, sure." You know, it was just, I love that. I love that. I love that.
He's in many ways a massive contradictions, but as you say, surely the most interesting drummer on earth.
Definitely, and I would go even further to say a real mastermind of metal. Lars Ulrich, mastermind of
metal.
If you liked this episode, be sure to leave us a review, share it with a friend, or plain old subscribe wherever you happen to listen to it. For full episode show notes, visit nofilter.media/Getcha Rocks Off.
This has been a No Filter Media production.
Say what you want.